Hello, folks. I think that I am live streaming. I'm on a brand new setup today, and I'm going to talk about a few things today. You know, it's been kind of, I think many of us might be in this kind of mode where with what is going on in the world, you might be feeling a bit depressed. I know I've definitely been feeling it, especially when so many people are just indoctrinated. So that's really what I wanted to talk about, indoctrination. So let's talk a little bit about indoctrination. This is going to be kind of a write it out as I talk about it, and then we'll show some supportive videos. So, indoctrination. You know, I often call public education public indoctrination. I can't remember who first shared that with me. But yeah, indoctrination is something that the powers that should not be have worked quite hard and diligently to do so that they really could get a grasp of the human mind. Because, you know, government is mind control. I should have worn that shirt, but you know, when I have my other camera set up, I'm going to wear my Government is Slavery shirt that I purchased from the What on Earth is Happening website. Mark Passio has some amazing clothing and videos and other merchandise. I think, you know, if you have friends and family, you should buy everybody a Government is Slavery t-shirt this Christmas. I have no friends, so I don't know. I think I maybe have, well, most of my friends are canines, so maybe we can see if Mark can sell some Government is Slavery dog shirts, although I don't think my dogs would like wearing those, nor would my cat. Yeah, it's been kind of a crazy couple of weeks. You know, a lot of my personal family, it's quite sad, you know. I mean, everything in my life right now, I'm trying to keep my head above water, I guess is what I'm trying to say, but simply because, you know, people treat me like I'm some sort of leper, you know, because I don't wear masks. I don't believe in injecting myself with chemicals that are foreign to my body, especially those that might trigger a messenger RNA to be read by my own ribosomes. You know, I think I've drawn this out in the past, but, you know, I don't want messenger RNA to be injected into my cells. And I don't want to turn my cells into a protein factory for some little spike protein that's going to damage all of my endothelial cells and other tissues in my body and cause swelling and immune responses that I just don't want to have to deal with, you know? So, yeah, I'm not getting any injections. I'm not going to wear a mask and limit my breathing. And because I just want to align with nature. That's all I really want to do, is align with nature. I am being treated like, oh, you know, you can't be around her. She hasn't gotten the injection. It's crazy. Certain people in my family are not fans of my decision. And they're very concerned. And they're indoctrinating, you know, they are indoctrinated. I mean, I think they have good hearts, but they are indoctrinated by the news and the fear. I wish I could get across to people that if fear is controlling you, that truly is evil. Because when any power, any authority, and I'm going to put that in quotes, when any authority is using fear as a mechanism to coerce a group of individuals, that's not the type of mandates, or that's not the type of, how should I put it? Those aren't the types of laws you should follow, okay? That's kind of what man's law falls under. Man's law, you know, is malleable, it changes. You know, you go across an imaginary line that we call a border, and certain plants become illegal. And those were the good old man's laws when, you know, things weren't as corrupt as they are today. Now, you know, evil people that are in these places of perceived power, they're trying to control our lives. And, you know, I've been trying to stay out of it, but, you know, there's only so much you can do when you live on a planet with other humans. And that's something, you know, I wanted to talk about. You know, I've spent the past, I guess it's since this pandemic began in March of 2020, so we're going on our second year almost. So this upcoming March, it'll be 2 years. 2 years to flatten the damn curve. And, sorry, I'm drinking kombucha tea I got in the mail today. It's pretty decent. I'll show it to you since I only have this camera hooked up. It's a Health Aid Kombucha Holiday Cheers. And it is bubbly. I like bubbly drinks. I'm not a big fan of kombuchas, but the place I order food from, since I don't go into grocery stores anymore, I order from this company called Imperfect Foods. And they get like excess produce, you know, fruits and vegetables, and every now and then they have little fun things that they bring me, like these kombucha drinks. And I don't think they're necessarily that healthy, and nor am I a big fan of taking any kind of probiotic. I think the best thing to do as far as helping your microbiome is to eat a species-appropriate diet. And then the good bacteria will naturally populate your intestinal tract. But, yeah, it's just been, you know, this past month really has been just full of many feelings. And I've been feeling very, I don't know, it's just like I'm day by day these days. I'm really trying to just push through and stay strong. And that's about it. So, there were a few things I wanted to talk about as I introduce, you know, this live stream. I brought a few books with me that I might mention today. One of which is Rosemary Gladstar's Medicinal Herbs. Let's see if I can turn that light off. If that helps y'all see it a little bit better. I think that the light reflects a little bit too much. So, Rosemary Gladstar is a pretty awesome herbalist, and I know Dr. Morse really likes her and her work. We were thinking of asking her to join us at the naturopathic school, and maybe, you know, doing some herbal courses. But, you know, I like this book. I purchased this book unfortunately, I purchased it on Amazon recently. But, you know, it's got some really cool recipes on how to incorporate herbs into your life. And herbs are plants. They're simply food, but they do have medicinal properties. Properties that are so much more in resonance, in vibratory resonance with our living organism, with life. You know, so one of the main topics I wanted to talk about today, and I'll keep this book here in case anybody's interested in, you know, getting an herbal book, but this is an herbal book I would recommend. I think I had an older version of this. I couldn't find it, so I just bought another one, but this is a good book. And there's something that I think I actually had it up. Maybe I'll share it really quick. I had this YouTube video up. I'm not going to play it, but I'll show it to you. Look at me doing the transition here on the OBS. So this is Rudolf Steiner. This is actually, I think, he carved this. Yeah, it's written here, right here. Head of Ahriman, carved by Rudolf Steiner, who prophesied the birth of the Antichrist in the West when, before a part of the third millennium has passed. Interesting. And this is where we are right now. The third millennium is between the years 2001 and 3000. That would encompass the third millennium. And that is when Rudolf Steiner, anyway, who was a clairvoyant, that is when he predicted Ahriman would have incarnated on this planet. And I've talked about Ahriman in my earlier videos. A lot of them, if you go to the One Great Work Network and look at my past videos, you'll see some of those. But Ahriman, Lucifer, I like to think of them as beings that walked upon this earth. They were physical beings. Lucifer was a physical being, kind of like around 3000 BC. And then Jesus, the Christ, was at 0. It was predicted maybe he was born maybe 3 BC or maybe 2 AD, but it was around year 0. I mean, that's what we kind of, in the West, we create the calendar around him. BC means before Christ. And then Ahriman is the third being. Now, I sure as hell hope Jesus comes back, because I think that, I think as humans, Jesus had a message for us. And his message was to share with the planet that we can do what he did on earth. He shared in his message with the people. And I am not, I'm not a very in-depth knower of the Bible. In fact, I've been reading a lot about Jesus, much because I just find him to be such a source of just good news. I mean, that's what they call the Gospels, right? The good news. And that's what Jesus shared with his apostles. I just recently finished reading this book. Let me go and go back to my other screen. This book, Jesus, the Last Great Initiate. I was reading this, I think, I was reading from the book. And when I was going back to, I think, edit that book. I can't remember if I edited it or not. But I noticed that I am not as well-spoken as the man who reads from the Rudolf Steiner books. This man with the most beautiful voice, he reads Steiner's written works and his speeches from when he, was alive back in the early 1900s. And he has got a great voice. My voice, not so great. Not so great. Maybe I have to read the book a couple of times to really understand the words, because a lot of times, like a book like this, he's talking about a lot of the places in the Middle East where Jesus, was traversing the land, and I can't pronounce many of those words. Anyway, this was a really good book. And the reason why I liked this book is because the author, maybe we can just read what it says on the back here. The author, if I can zoom in a little bit, there we go. So, an esoteric take on the life of an Essene Jesus, considered as the last of a line of hidden initiates. Schur, who is the author of this book, viewed Christ as both an historical individual and as a manifestation of the divine in the human realm. So the reason why I like this book is because it did begin with a discussion of Jesus as an Essene. I mean, that's like the whole first chapter, the Essene Jesus, all right? Well, it's one of the earlier chapters. And the Essenes really helped to sculpt the individual power, the will of Jesus. And he really did become knowledgeable of many of the esoteric mysteries that, and as an Essene, I think he was able to learn how to gain powers that all humans have the capacity. All humans have the capacity to exhibit, to express. And I think that was Jesus's main message to us, is we, as the followers of the Christ, or as those that feel called, feel, moved by his words, we have the ability to do what he came on this earth to do initially. He was just here to show us what our capacities were. And I think that was Jesus's message. So many people, I kind of said it jokingly, but many people are hoping Jesus is going to come back and save us from evil people like fuckface Fauci and Bill Gates. And, these people are evil. And I think we cannot rely on Jesus to come back. Nor do I think Jesus wants us to rely upon him coming back. Right? So we have to be strong enough, not fear, not be afraid. It's sad because I'm still on the stupid Facebook every now and then. I really try to stay away from it. I'm there because a couple of people reach out to me for services that I like to provide to the world for people that maybe want health consultations. Although most people these days are finding me through my website, not through Facebook. I'm not doing a lot of advertising at all through Facebook. I used to have the name of my website as a text. I'm gonna add my website to this live stream. I should have gotten this all together earlier, huh? But anyway, I don't think Jesus really wants us to be waiting for his return. I think the best thing we could do is to align with the power within ourselves. And there's really nothing to be afraid of. I really don't think there's anything to be afraid of. I think the main thing that we need to do is align with truth, align with nature. I mean, it's so strange, that we are perfectly okay. People are perfectly okay with, these magical, made-up, man-made chemicals to be injected in the body in the name of health. And that's nothing. That is not health at all. That's the antithesis of health. Health is a vibration. Health is a resonance. And we don't even think in that way. So let me come back to this before I digress too much. And I'm sorry, my dog is in the background playing with a bone. And she sometimes drops it. I can't wait till maybe next week and I can actually get my office completely set up and you'll see my new room. I do have some pretty cool wall hangings. I have a wall hanging of the Seed of Life and another one of the Egyptian kind of third eye, which is really the diencephalon of the brain. So when I get my office completely set up, hopefully you'll be able to see all of those cool wall hangings. I used to be down in my basement and you guys could hear my dogs barking, and my 4-year-old dog barks quite a bit, so in this office I can actually let him stay outside of the office and close the door, so that's a little bit safer. But the other 2 dogs are with me, my 15-year-old dog and my 3-year-old dog, because they're more well-behaved. Okay, let's get back to Ahriman. So Ahriman, let me go back to this YouTube video. This is actually a video by, this is a YouTube video, Rudolf Steiner's, this guy that reads his books, and he's got a beautiful voice. When I edit this video, I will put all of the links to things I'm referring to in the video description. And you may notice I'm not sharing this on YouTube, because I really don't. I mean, I know I'm going to get kicked off of YouTube, so I'm just going to share this on Odyssey, and I think it's on Twitch as well. So, Ahriman, the reason why he was such a problem, and he really, when we look at the grander scheme I mentioned Lucifer was on the earth around 3000 BC. Jesus came at, he was here around year 0, and it's estimated he was crucified. His body was crucified around 33 AD. And then, now is possibly the time of Ahriman, which Rudolf Steiner, again in his clairvoyant knowing, predicted would be here at the 3rd millennium, or before, I should say, a part of the 3rd millennium has passed. So that could very well be the current times we're living in. And Lucifer and Ahriman, I think, in my study of Rudolf Steiner, I view them as opposite sides of that of which we call like the devil or Satan. So, if you remember, if you know anything of Jesus and his story, or, the truth about Jesus as written in the Bible, in the Gospels, Jesus was tempted by the devil, the temptation of Christ. And he was, offered so many riches, and, he could be the king of the Jews and all of that. And, he told Satan to get the hell behind him. He's like, I don't want that. He knew what his purpose and he knew what he needed to do in his incarnation on this earth. So, he told Satan to get behind him. He's like, back off, dude. So, who was this Satan? And was it kind of a mixture of Lucifer and Ahriman? Lucifer and Ahriman both, according to Steiner, did bring forth to humanity certain gifts. Lucifer was more of the arts and more of the kind of the right hemisphere abilities when we look at the two cerebral hemispheres. And Mark Passio has talked about this, the two halves of the brain, left brain, right brain. But definitely, I think the way that Rudolf Steiner talks about this is that Lucifer, his gifts more were allowing the development of the right hemisphere, which is truly the more sensory type of experience, the arts, artistic endeavors. But also, it's not very balanced, right? The right hemisphere, when you let that go haywire, it's harder to kind of ground yourself. And so Ahriman, and you can see his influence definitely today, very mechanistic, very materialistic. It basically separates spirit from the physical. So whereas the spirit was more enhanced by Lucifer, and think about like talking in tongues and the spiritual expression of just, really not focusing on anything in the physical realm, but just totally in the spiritual realm, right? And that was Lucifer. And perhaps that's why so many ancient peoples on our planet were so much historically influenced by, religion and, the spiritual life. But now, as we are getting closer to the 3rd millennium, that's not such a big deal anymore, right? That is, it's who cares about religion? Now, the big thing is science. I mean, we freaking had Fuckface Fauci, that is my name for him, Fuckface Fauci. We had Fuckface Fauci saying that he was science. If you question these vaccines, you're questioning science. I am science. I mean, that guy's a real piece of work. I want to share with you all a video. I stole this, or I copied this, from the Alex Jones show. It's the Greg Reese Report. Alright, so we're going to watch a little video of Fuckface Fauci. Can you guys see in the bottom left-hand corner, I even wrote out Fuckface Fauci. So there you go. so is Fuckface Fauci, could he be the Antichrist, you know? I mean, there's a lot of questions. If we are in the time period of Ahriman, who is it? Who is this materialistic a-hole that is trying to mechanize life? I mean, life is such a spiritual mystery. And, you know, I was completely indoctrinated into that thinking. And I think that's the whole goal of public indoctrination or public education. I mean, they mechanize everything. They've completely separated spirit from all thought, from all science. There is nothing spiritual. And that's why, you know, Rudolf Steiner, I mean, he wrote books and gave speeches on spiritual science, bringing the spirit back into the discussion of what science really is, which is truly understanding the physical. But it's not just the physical. So, yeah, so it's quite interesting the times we're in. And I think, you know, if we take in consideration Jesus' message that we need to be as powerful and to know our true power of what he came to do, we can do also. And it, you know, it does take going within, knowing thyself, understanding, and meditating, and focusing. Really, that's kind of what it takes to develop these powers. So, this kind of connects to another discussion I wanted to bring to the table. And this is something in my naturopathic A&P course that I'm going to be teaching Sunday with Dr. Robert Morris. This is going to be part of our lecture that night, so let me share with you part of one of the books I'm going to be sharing with the topics from this book. This is Human Heart, Cosmic Heart by Tom Cowan. He's also the person that wrote The Contagion Myth, which is a great book. And we're in my Human Anatomy and Physiology course that I'm teaching, the naturopathic version. I also teach Human A&P at a regular college. But this naturopathic course that I'm teaching with Dr. Morris, we are discussing the heart. And I'm trying to make a deliberate effort to bring forth the spiritual discussion. So since I'm going to be talking about this on Sunday with my other students, I thought I'd share a little bit about that here. And the heart is such an interesting organ. I mean, when we look at, you know, just the typical way in which I teach the heart to my traditional allopathic students, you know, we describe the heart as being a pump. The heart is a pump. It has 4 chambers. The lower chambers, which are called the ventricles, their job is to pump the blood away from the heart. And then the upper chambers, the atria, they really are receiving the blood from veins. So maybe if I, you know, just share with you all a picture of what allopathic types of students, or even like in any traditional college, what they learn about the heart in their discussions. So I'll just pull up one of my lectures that I teach my allopathic students. So the heart, before we come back to the more esoteric description of the heart. So here is a very simplistic look at the cardiovascular system. We have, again, the 2 upper chambers, the atria. The 2 lower chambers are the ventricles. And, you know, the modern allopathic description of the heart is that it's a pump. Now, what's interesting, this pump, you know, the left side of the heart, by the way, the left ventricle in particular, its wall has the highest amount of myocardium, muscle tissue, and its job is to take oxygen-rich blood, which we color code as red, and to quote-unquote pump that oxygen-rich blood through the largest artery in the body, the aorta, which has many branches coming off of it. Some of those branches go all the way up to the top of the head and, all the way down to the bottom of our toes and everywhere in between. And that is delivering the oxygen to all of our cells. Every cell in our body requires oxygen to produce energy via a metabolic process called cellular respiration. So you can see in these small blood vessels called capillaries, oxygen is exchanged for carbon dioxide. So oxygen is the main gas we inhale, carbon dioxide is the main gas we exhale. So after we, deliver the oxygen throughout the body, and other things are delivered in the blood as well, like nutrients and things like hormones can pass through the blood. The blood then returns back to the heart. So we can see the blood is now blue in color because we signify deoxygenated blood or oxygen poor blood as being blue. And that blood passes by way of veins into the right atrium. Remember, the upper chambers are the atria. And the right atrium sends that deoxygenated blood down to the right ventricle. And now, the right ventricle, it sends blood to the lungs because that's where we need to go pick up oxygen because, we already gave it off, so we need to go get some more oxygen. And there is this artery called the pulmonary trunk, which divides into the left and right pulmonary arteries, sending that deoxygenated blood to the lungs where we pick up oxygen and give off carbon dioxide. And now we have oxygen-rich blood again. We return that back to the heart to an atrium. This is the left atrium. And again, because the blood is oxygenated, we color-code it red. And then that passes down to the left ventricle, and we repeat the process all over again. So it's kind of like a double-sided pump, right? And what is interesting about this model of the heart are a couple of things. First, the heart, the ventricles, the muscle tissue in the ventricles, because their job is to pump the blood away either to the entire body on the left side or to the lungs from the right side. This muscle tissue, when you really look at it in a mechanistic way, if you were to take the same amount of muscle tissue and squirt against gravity, because, we're pushing this blood up against gravity, squirt a fluid, a very thick and viscous fluid, because, the blood has water in it, but it also has a lot of cells and other stuff, so it's not exactly like water. It's a little bit thicker, more viscous. So if you're going to take a very viscous fluid and pump it, the amount of muscle tissue just in the left ventricle alone could take a given fluid like the blood and with its maximum force of contraction, force it up maybe a few feet. But these blood vessels that they're simplistically showing here, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of miles of blood vessels throughout the entire body. And the left ventricle is not strong enough to pump that blood that far of a distance. And then add to that the fact that when the blood gets to these very small vessels, the capillaries, the blood kind of pauses as it's exchanged. I mean, we don't want the blood to move too quickly through these capillaries because we need time to give off the oxygen to pick up carbon dioxide. So the blood slows down, and then it passes into the veins and it speeds up a little bit, although the pressure does decrease the further we get away from the heart, the source of pumping action, if you will. So this model is not very realistic, but it's the one that's taught in every biology book, every physiology book. I mean, when I was in high school, when I was an undergrad student, when I went to medical school, when I was in graduate school, every book that I've learned about the heart anatomy and physiology from, and as a college professor of the human anatomy and physiology, this is what I teach, right? But it's nonsense. This is nonsense. This is kind of wishful thinking that this left ventricle can do that. I mean, it's even, the right ventricle is not pushing the blood that far. I mean, it's just going next door to the two lungs that are in the same, chest cavity, thoracic cavity as the heart is. So it's going a much less of a distance. But still, even the right ventricle would have a hard time doing that. Okay? So what's interesting about the heart is that we are not looking at it in a more holistic way as we should. And many people, like Rudolf Steiner, like Arnold Ehret, people that are more balanced in their outlook of the world and of the human as not just a body, but a spirit and a soul. We have, those people have come up with alternate theories of what the heart really is, all right? And Tom Cowan, in his book, so let's go back to the book here, which I think this is a great book, Human Heart, Cosmic Heart. He has a website, I think, of the same name, although he might have taken the website down. I don't know. I haven't looked recently. But he describes the heart and, a different, he kind of aligns more with the Rudolf Steiner theory of what helps to move blood throughout the body. And he gets kind of into Gerald Pollack's discussion of water and how water moves through very large trees. Like if the theory is that, how does a very tall redwood tree that's over, hundreds of feet in height, how does water pass from the root system of that tree all the way up, hundreds of feet in the air, to the top leaves? I mean, there are little tubes, the xylem, that carry this fluid against gravity. And it's thought that, water can only travel so far against gravity. Like, I think it's 32 feet perhaps, before the pressure would oppose that movement. But yet, the redwood tree, hundreds of feet in height, can receive water. It is very tall leaves. And Tom Cowan and Gerald Pollack explain that because of water's ability to form something called an exclusion zone when it has two different things that it's exposed to. One of which is a hydrophilic surface, which a smooth endothelial lining of our blood vessel wall would have such a surface, because all of these cells are lined with membrane proteins which have a partial charge. And they create this exclusion zone, which helps to then create this kind of perpetual flow when we add to that some sort of energy source, like the sun or grounding, walking barefoot, the touch of another living being, whether it be, another human or an animal. All of that promotes life, and life is movement. But there's something else I want to talk about, so that's, one mechanism. Arnold Ehret, on the other hand, he talks about the lungs and the heart playing a role in moving the blood. And he says that the lungs are the pump and the heart is kind of just like a valve. It's a holding valve. And the process of breathing moves the blood. And that's really kind of what happens when the baby takes its first breath. In utero, a little fetus is not breathing on its own. The mother is breathing for the fetus, and that oxygen-rich blood is reaching the fetus by way of the placenta. So the fetus is very dependent on the mother's breath. But once the baby is born, there is a pressure change. So in the fetus, maybe I'll pull the fetal circulation up for just a second. And we'll look at that difference in the fetus blood flow, because that kind of is similar to what Arnold Ehret, his theory of the lungs and the heart pump. So here's a little fetus. You can see the blue vessels. Those are the umbilical arteries, and they are blue. They're carrying deoxygenated blood away from the fetus via the umbilical cord to the placenta, which is a disc-shaped tissue in the uterus, in the wall of the uterus. And this is the exchange site between the mother's blood and the fetus's blood. The blood doesn't mix, but, you know, things are exchanged. So oxygen from the mother's blood diffuses into the fetus's blood. Carbon dioxide from the fetus's blood diffuses out into the mother's blood. And then when the mother exhales, she's breathing out the fetus's carbon dioxide. But anyway, the fetus is getting oxygen from the mother via the placenta, and that returns to the fetus by way of the umbilical vein, which is the single red vessel. It empties into the belly button and then becomes continuous with the ductus venosus, which passes into the inferior vena cava and eventually into the right atrium of the heart. Now, in fetal circulation, there's a hole right here called the foramen ovale, and it actually connects the right and left sides of the heart. So remember, we said earlier that these two were separated. So it's like the heart has two sides and they don't mix, but in fetal circulation they do. So this hole allows for the blood to flow from the right atrium to the left atrium. And that diverts a lot of that blood to the left side of the heart, which pumps the blood ultimately throughout the entire body, because we don't need to go to the lungs. The right side of the heart, remember, sends the blood by way of the pulmonary arteries to the lungs. And since we already have oxygen, we're trying to bypass the lungs. So that's the whole purpose of this fetal route, this fetal circulatory route with these shunts. So one of the shunts is the foramen ovale. The other one, because not all of the blood passes to the left side through this foramen ovale, some of it does go down to the right ventricle into the pulmonary trunk, and there's another shunt called the ductus arteriosus, which will take then the rest of the blood from the pulmonary trunk directly to the aorta. And so this is diverting blood away from the lungs because we don't need to pick up oxygen there. The lungs and the fetus are not participating in gas exchange. So how does this kind of connect with our discussion of what Arnold Ehret calls the lung-heart mechanism of moving blood? Well, when the fetus is born, when this little girl takes her first breath outside of her mother's uterus, that first breath will cause kind of an expansion in her lungs, and that creates a pressure change. And when something expands, when a volume expands, the pressure decreases. And fluid and air will flow into these tissues. So that will draw air into the alveoli of the lungs, but it also is going to draw blood by way of these pulmonary capillaries into the lungs. And so by creating a high volume, lower pressure, we're kind of sucking or drawing air and blood into these organs. And the oxygen fills the alveoli, that oxygen will diffuse into that blood, and now the newborn baby is breathing on its own. And that first breath, quite important, because now for the first time, we're oxygenating these lungs, and then some of that blood is going to be brought back. Let's go back to our after birth look at the heart. Some of that blood, after it's brought into the lungs, is going to be brought back to the heart by way of pulmonary veins into the left atrium. And so it's this pressure change where the lungs are acting as the pump. It's creating the pressure differential, which is drawing the blood to and from the lungs by way of the heart. But, you know, when I look at the Arnold Ehret mechanism, that does explain a lot about blood flow between the right side of the heart and the lungs, but not so much between the left side of the heart. I mean, yes, we're returning that blood back to the left side of the heart, but what about the left side of the heart to the rest of the entire body in what we call the systemic circuit? So another interesting observation. This is something that is noticed, like during open heart surgeries. You know, when I was a medical student, even in undergrad, I, was allowed to sit in on some surgeries. And in undergrad, I never saw an open heart surgery, but, during open heart surgeries, when you're looking at the heart beating in the chest of somebody whose heart is exposed. I mean, think about such, an invasive procedure to have somebody's chest open and the heart is beating. Well, when the heart beats, when this left ventricle is contracting, being that it's so powerful and, according to their theory, this chamber, I don't know if you guys can even see my picture. Oh my goodness. My bad, guys. I don't know if you all saw this. Oh, goodness gracious. I need to pay attention to what images I have on the screen. Well, when I edit this video, I will make sure this picture is in place when I'm describing fetal circulation. I apologize. I don't know if I have too many people with me today, right now, in the live stream. But what time do we have? 6 o'clock? We're good on time. Maybe I'll just re-describe it here. So I was mentioning, blood flow through the heart, and Rudolf Steiner talks about the heart being kind of like a holding valve, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But Tom Cowan, when he discusses blood flow from the heart, in his description of the heart not being a pump, he is bringing forth in his book, Human Heart, Cosmic Heart, work from Gerald Pollack, who talks about how water reaches very tall redwood trees, right? So redwood trees, they're hundreds of feet in height, and how do they get water way up there? Because it's thought that water can only flow so far going against gravity in a hydrophilic tube before the pressure of the atmosphere would oppose it. Well, according to Gerald Pollack and described by Tom Cowan in his book, there is this exclusion zone, and that's kind of, what moves the blood. But in addition to that, you do need an energy source like the sun, or, an electromagnetic field like another human or another living being, a dog, a cat, even a plant. I mean, all of these, grounding, walking barefoot on the earth, all of this energizes movement of fluid, right? And then after I described that movement of the blood in the blood vessels, I wanted to talk a little bit about Arnold Ehret, which is why I brought forth this picture of fetal circulation. And I didn't have this up when I was sharing it before, so I'm just going to share it all over again. It never hurts to repeat information. So, and I apologize, this wasn't up before, but this is a little fetus, and when a fetus is inside of her mother's uterus, and this is a little girl fetus, so we will say her, the blood, the deoxygenated blood, you can see is color-coded blue, it leaves the fetus in the umbilical cord by these two little umbilical arteries, and that passes to the placenta. The wall of the uterus is where you find the placenta, the womb of the mother. And the placenta acts as the source of exchange between what's in the mother's blood and what is in the fetus's blood. So oxygen from the mother will diffuse into the fetus's blood. Carbon dioxide from the fetus diffuses into the mother's blood, and the mother will exhale that carbon dioxide for the little fetus. And then we're going to return that oxygen-rich blood now to the fetus from the placenta, and that travels via the umbilical vein, a single vessel in the umbilical cord. It empties into where we connect to the belly button, into the ductus venosus, and then passes ultimately into the inferior vena cava and then the right atrium of the heart. And in the right atrium of the heart, we have a hole that connects the right and left sides of the heart. I mentioned earlier that the two sides of the heart, right and left, are two separate. Think of them as two separate in the traditional allopathic teachings, two separate pumps. They don't connect. Right? So the right side and the left side are completely separate from one another after we're born. But as a fetus, they are connected. And there's a hole in the interatrial septum called the foraminal valley. It's open during fetal circulation. And some of that blood that comes into the right atrium will pass into the left atrium. Not all of it. Some of it does go down to the right ventricle into the pulmonary trunk. But there's another shunt called the ductus arteriosus, which will kind of, grab the rest of that oxygen-rich blood. And the whole purpose of these two shunts, the foraminal valley and the ductus arteriosus, is to divert blood away from going to the lungs in the fetus. Because the fetus lungs are not participating in gas exchange. Remember, the placenta and the mother's breath is what is bringing in the oxygen and releasing the carbon dioxide. So the mother's lungs are doing this, right? And she is delivering that oxygen-rich blood to her fetus. So we don't need to go to the lungs. But here's where I'm getting to what Arnold Ehret describes, again, as the lungs being the pump and the heart being kind of like a holding valve. When the baby is born and the baby takes its first breath, the lung tissue expands. The lungs get bigger. And whenever something increases in volume, the pressure inside of that decreases. Volume and pressure are inversely related. And so we have the lungs expanding for the first time, filling with air. We create a low pressure environment, and low pressure is going to draw air and fluid towards that environment of low pressure. So not only are we drawing air in to the lungs from the cute little fetus mouth down their respiratory conductive system to the lung, the alveoli, but we're also going to be drawing blood by way of the pulmonary arteries to the lungs. Okay? So we're drawing blood for the first time now to the lungs and air. And by creating this differential pressure in the lungs, we're affecting the movement of the blood. So the blood will be drawn to the lungs, and then eventually that blood will leave the lung tissue and go to the left atrium of the heart. And then we kind of go back to what we have in the adult, right? So we return oxygen-rich blood to the left atrium, and then it goes to the left ventricle, and the left ventricle pumps that throughout the entire body. Now, the left ventricle is a different story. So I think Arnold Ehret, his description, perfect, I think, when we're describing the right side of the heart. But for the left side of the heart, maybe we do need to incorporate other ideas, kind of like what Gerald Pollack and Tom Cowan talk about. But that's not the only thing that is, interesting about the heart. The shape of the heart is fascinating. You may have heard the term helical heart, because the heart is a helix, and its chambers produce a vortex. The vortex is a very sacred spin. It's an energetic spin. The vortex is life. Let me show you, and Tom Cowan does kind of share some images of the vortex. Frank Chester, who created the Chester model, the chestahedron, if you will, which is a sacred geometrical shape. I'll share all of this with you. Let me go back to other camera here, and hopefully I won't forget to transition again. So here's the vortex, right? So you can see this little spin. And so when the blood is filling into the chambers of the ventricles, the blood will spin in a vortex. And we're adding energy. And life is energy. We're adding a sacred spin. And I wish I could find, there was, a group of ancient peoples who talked about this spin as being where life enters the human, where the soul enters the human being upon that first sacred spin, emptying, perhaps from, when we create that very first spin, let's say in the fetus, becoming a newborn baby. And that spin is occurring right here in the left ventricle. That sacred spin, that vortex, is produced, the very first one. And that is where the soul enters for the first time. Very interesting. And here is where we're getting into spiritual science. That shape, I don't know if you can see this. This is what's called the chestahedron. It's placed in this box. It sits at an angle of 36 degrees off center. This is the same angle at which the heart sits within the chest. There's another picture, I think, on the previous page. I'll just read the verbiage below. Frank Chester's, let's see if I can make this a little bit lighter. I don't know if that will work. Frank Chester's chestahedron is a 7-sided form made of 4 equilateral triangles and 3 kite-shaped quadrilaterals. The chestahedron has equivalent surface areas as 12 edges. 12 edges, just pausing there for a second. 12, a very sacred number. 12 edges, 3 different symmetries, and may offer insight into the form and function of the human heart. And Frank Chester, there's his website, frankchester.com. Highly recommend you look at some of his work. But yeah, the vortex and the sacred spin of blood as it's moving through the heart. And that is kind of, one of the true purposes of the heart. The heart is there to create a sacred spin to our blood. And the heart is a helix. So there's another video I want to share with you all as we continue our discussion of the heart. This one has to do with that vortex shape of the spin, the sacred flow.
To my mind, the human heart center is not a pump. It's a spinner. It's a blood spinner, and its shape kind of proves it. So come on down here and have a look just at this towel. If I have a towel, right, and I kind of have say I fold it up, this little thing. Now look, it kind of starts out this way, but if a vortex were to go through it, that would make it spin, right? And spin, and we kind of turn it on itself. We just keep spinning, and look what happens to materials and fluids that are spinning. They start to braid around each other, and we end up with a shape something like that. Okay, now enter the human heart. I highly recommend it. We have a beautiful heart center here from our donor Z, who's given us many gifts. We have our right ventricle and our left ventricle, and I want to show you in reverse how the heart demonstrates that same sort of braiding and turning upon itself. So we have our sort of like a conch shell with the most inner turn and the most outer turn here, the right ventricle and the left ventricle. And if I've already done this, but you see that beautiful spiral? See how the upper vasculature of the heart, the pulmonary trunk and the aorta, are turned around each other. And as I draw them apart, of course I dissected this, we see now in my right hand I have the right ventricle, and in my left hand I have the left, and I'm unwinding the wall between them. And can you see this incredible conch shell as it unwinds? Look at this. Look at the beautiful fiber direction as we proceed further and further until I'm in the chamber, and the chamber itself is wound upon itself, the left ventricle here. And if I had more hands, look at this, see? It really, if I keep on holding the shape, you see, I can then reach out to the right side and unwind it as well. And we end up with a vortex, a hurricane that's turned upon itself, right? So there's our towel. Here's our towel, and then we wind up the towel on itself. And it rolls and rolls until we see the familiar form of our beautiful heart center. But now we know one little inner secret about it, right? We know that our heart is really the locus where the blood spins itself, right? The life force is refreshed and spun by the contraction of the fibers of the beautiful heart center, literally wringing the blood out of itself as it ejects through these incredible valves and tours the entire human form before it returns again for another refreshing wringing out and spinning forth the reoxygenated blood. Incredible, huh? Look at that. Wow. Heart center. The place where the blood spins itself. Thanks, Z.
So yeah, that's another website I'll give reference to, gilheadley.com. Fascinating. I mean, just I wish I could take the time in the labs I teach at to dissect, but I'm not a big fan of animal dissections at all. I think that we should let the animals be. But I was fortunate enough to dissect a human cadaver when I was in medical school. Someone who voluntarily donated their body. And it's fascinating to see real living organisms. But you have to wonder, and Tom Cowan talks about this quite a bit. Again, this connects to the Ahrimanic deception, the Ahrimanic limited view of life. So let's look at this, beginning of this YouTube video, the Ahrimanic deception by Rudolf Steiner. Ahriman totally mechanizes life. There's no discussion of anything sacred in any living study of life. And that has brought us to where we are today, where now we think that health is a deficiency of injections of chemicals that are foreign to the body, that we equate that with health. This is how far humans have been coerced and led off the path of truth. We are no longer in alignment with that middle path. And Christ, Jesus, is the middle path. Lucifer and Ahriman, they're the two outer paths. Which, yes, like I mentioned earlier, Lucifer brought forth gifts that benefit mostly the right hemisphere, that knowing, the more spiritual, energetic, kind of crazy, artsy-fartsy type of life expression. Ahriman brings forth the understanding of the physical, the mechanistic understanding, which, they both have their place, but one allowed to go too far without the balance of the other brings forth so much pain and suffering. And that's, I think, what we're all experiencing today with this current pandemic. And what is so incredibly sad, as I was kind of alluding to when I first began this live stream, was the fact that I don't know how to speak to people anymore. Members of my own family, co-workers. So many people are under the influence of this Ahrimanic deception. I mean, in my department, I teach at a college in the biology department. Everybody I teach with has a PhD, a doctorate. And yet they're all enamored by this injection. They're pushing forth the injection. They think the wearing of the face diaper is virtuous. It's sad. It's quite sad. And I feel lost because, you know, I'm still not teaching on campus because I can't align with this. I'm debating about, you know, my future as a college professor. Because, you know, I see what I'm doing day by day. And I'm just kind of promoting this evil system. This Ahrimanic deception, this system of, you know, minimizing the spirit. I mean, some of the students that come through my classes want to learn, and they find it all fascinating, and they're amazed by the inner workings of the human body. I mean, I do try to give some sort of, you know, feel or essence of just how amazing all of this is. But in truth, you know, do I really know what I'm talking about? I mean, we describe the human body through dissection, through looking at it with, you know, machines that often expose, you know, harmful chemicals to the body, like x-rays and MRIs and, you know, functional MRIs and PET scans, you know, where you're injecting radioactive dyes, radioactive glucose into the body. I mean, all of this is not life. This is harming life in order to study life. So you either have to expose the body to something harmful to understand how it works, or dissect a dead person or animal to understand how life works. And that's not life that we're looking at. So do you really understand this miracle, this amazing essence, expression called life? What is life? I mean, I'm a biologist, the study of life, and it's all become so mechanistic, and it's so depressing, and honestly is. I mean, what's scary is that, you know, I'm really good at reciting how the body works based on the Ahrimanic description of the human body, and that's what I'm doing, you know, day in and day out, 5 days a week. I teach human anatomy and physiology, describing, you know, this mechanistic look at the human body, and it depletes me. I need more of the essence of the soul. I really do. Which is why, you know, I'm teaching a course with Dr. Robert Morse, which, let's talk about Dr. Morse for a little bit. I think everybody that is on this live stream watching these videos, you should really check out Dr. Morse. I mean, I call him my mentor because he's really taught me a ton about human health and life. And he's a very spiritual man. Let's see if I can get this all in here. All right, so this is a book that Dr. Morse wrote called the Detox Miracle Source Book, Raw Foods and Herbs for Complete Cellular Regeneration. And he's writing a newer book now, but, you know, he teaches these naturopathic courses, and I'm, you know, very fortunate. I'm grateful to be able to teach alongside him, and he has joined all of my A&P courses, and he provides so much beautiful insight as, you know, after I teach, the classes usually last for about an hour, and then we have a question and answer session right afterwards. And I really want to switch up these A&P courses. You know, we're finishing up the last course Sunday. And I think I'm going to just I want to get more people involved in these courses. And, you know, I've been so concerned about being able to pay for the servers. So I'm going to talk to Dr. Morris to see what we can do to get more people in the class, make it more affordable for them. And I'd really like to invite more people to the Q&A sessions, because I think students really, after the course, have such an in-depth understanding of what's really going on when we heal according to nature. When we heal according to nature. And what is nature? Nature heals with that which comes from the earth to nourish our cells. Like, fruits are the most healing foods for a man. Really, fruits are at the top. Fruits are number one. After the fruits, then you have, the vegetables, the herbs. The herbs are really the medicine. So, in Dr. Morse's book, Healing with Raw Foods and Herbs, we learn about, as naturopaths, not only the medicinal qualities of each and every herb, but how to prepare them, drying herbs in preparation for making powders or tinctures or liniments or anything. I mean, the herbs are beautiful. You can make salves. I mean, there's so much you can do with nature to heal the body. We really don't need these chemicals. And we had this knowledge before Rockefeller came and basically put a spell on humanity, and that spell is still being used today to coerce man away from the power of nature to heal. This thing that they've created fear around, and I mentioned earlier, people that try to control you with fear are not virtuous beings to follow. Whenever fear is being used as a tool to affect your actions, you are being led down the wrong path. Jesus did not teach, he inspired. He told his apostles and those that gathered around him that felt drawn to his message. As he would show these miraculous feats of healing, healing the blind, raising the cripple and bringing them back to walking again. I mean, the amazing things Jesus was able to do. And he learned many of these skills as an Essene. The Essenes, by the way, I've read the Essene Gospel of Peace, where it was talking about their use of water fasting and sunbathing, and even the use of enemas to heal, to remove obstructions, to allow the energetic flow as in the body. I mean, when you're constipated, there's a backup. So there's, intestinal constipation, but there's also, as Dr. Morse talks quite a bit about, lymphatic congestion and lymphatic constipation, interstitial constipation. All of that congestion creates obstructions. And the only way to free that energetic flow in the body is to remove the obstructions. You can't add something to remove an obstruction. A lot of times you need to remove something to remove an obstruction. You need to water fast. You need to rest. Use herbs that are astringent. So, Dr. Morse has something called the GI broom, which is a beautiful cleanser of the bowels. It astringently pulls lymphatic congestion from the intestinal tract, pulling those interstitial wastes into the lumen of the colon, and then, out it goes into the toilet. I mean, you want to make sure you're supporting normal peristaltic activity of the bowels. When you're taking something like GI broom, because those herbs are quite powerful, you don't want to pull all of that congestion out just to have it stuck in your bowels if you're not having at least 1 to 2 bowel movements a day. So when I, work with the client and I'm recommending something like the GI broom, I also recommend other herbal formulas like GI Renew, which helps to strengthen peristaltic activities. So, or other herbs that would be beneficial. And Dr. Morse has really great herbal blends, which is, those are typically the herbs I recommend. But there's there's lots of beautiful herbs. You know, you want to get your herbs from a really good herb company where they're going to respect the plants and not over harvest them, and add a sacred respect to these living forms that are being used as medicine for animals. But yeah, the mechanistic world of Ahriman. This is this is what, a 40-minute video. I'm not going to play the whole thing here, but Ahrimanic deception, the aims of the initiates of the East, of the West, of Jesuitism, the demonic influence of Ahriman upon mankind through technology. And that's where we are right now. I mean, think of how many people have talked about the technocracy and big tech. I mean, they're in control of this pandemic just as much as others are. In fact, I think it is a big tech control. That's what they're doing to, integrate AI so that they can control humanity more easily. And it's just like, and not that I know that this is the exact, because, everything in history right now is crazy, but, what did Hitler do with the people that he was trying to kill? The gypsies, the Jews, all of the people that he considered as deplorable. He used fear to guide them to their demise. And that's what they're doing now to us. And it breaks my heart when, I am on Facebook and I see, like my old grad school roommate. She posted a picture of 2 of her children, young children. I want to say they're like 7 and 10 years of age, maybe 6 and 9, I don't know. Both of them received the injection at that young age. And why do people trust this? I mean, that's the power, that the powers that should not be, their ability to coerce, to mind control. Government is mind control. And all of these different sources of media, the television, the internet, it's all to create fear, to coerce you to do something that may not be in your best interest. Science alone, science without spirit, is dangerous. Science without spirit is like a child with a gun who does not know how to respect and use that gun. I mean, it's a dangerous combination. And I'm not saying science is bad. All I'm saying is that science has been corrupted first and foremost. I mean, I started to become awakened to the corruption of science when I was in medical school and then graduate school. Especially in graduate school, my PhD program, the scientific research was just heartbreaking. And what they do to animals, and you saw that little video I shared of Fuckface Fauci, what he did not only to those poor beagles, but also to the children he wanted to test AZT on. I mean, this is why I call this made-up pandemic virus, I call it COVIDs. I didn't come up with that name. Jeff Berwick did. Jeff Berwick started calling it COVIDs right at the beginning of this pandemic. And it's because that was a virus that Fuckface Fauci was doing research on. And I don't even think it was a virus. I don't believe in the viral theory. I'm more in line with Tom Cowan. Read the Contagion book. I don't have that book with me. I'm looking at my little I have a small spectrum of my books in this new office, but I think I have Contagion Myth downstairs in my other office. But Contagion Myth, in the naturopathic courses that I teach with Dr. Morris, I talked about that book quite a bit in the introductory, in the cell biology course that I taught. Because viruses, to be honest with you, are simply detoxification expressions of a stressed cell. So maybe we'll do a little bit of whiteboard work and talk about what a virus is. I know I've shared this before, but it's nothing to be afraid of. It is not to be afraid of at all. Okay. Woohoo, look at that. All right. Hopefully you guys can all see that. I'm still changing things up a little bit. All right, we're good. Sorry, new setup on my new computer. I got a brand new laptop, by the way. So that's why I'm doing all of this with this. So anyway, what was I talking about? Exosomes. And no, I was talking about viruses. So a virus, you know, this little thing that they made up to create fear, to coerce everybody to take an injection of something that's probably not going to end up in helping their health in any way whatsoever. Because we don't have a chemical injection deficiency because of our lack of health. Our lack of health is due to us not being in alignment with nature. We have a lack of nature. We have a nature deficiency. So, let me talk a little bit about what this quote-unquote virus really is. So here's a cell. And the cell has a nucleus. And it has organelles, like, you know, the rough endoplasmic reticulum, and the Golgi apparatus, and a mitochondrion. So I talk about all of these organelles in my cell biology course. The rough endoplasmic reticulum has little ribosomes on its surface, making it look rough in appearance, right? So anyway, our nucleus contains genetic information, DNA. So here's some DNA. And in our nucleus, we have a little event that takes place called transcription. And during transcription, we produce something called messenger RNA. Messenger RNA. You may have heard about that because that's what they're injecting into us. Well, we naturally produce messenger RNA in all of our cells. That messenger RNA leaves the nucleus. It hooks up with one of those little ribosomes, those little dots. And by reading those little dots, we produce a protein. And the protein that we express, that's who we are. Proteins really are the workers of our body, of our cells. So think of proteins as being, you know, pigments. Like melanin is a protein that creates skin color, hair color, affects iris color. Actin and myosin in our muscles are the contractile proteins. Collagen is the most abundant protein in the human body, and collagen is found in our bones and in our skin. Keratin is the main protein in our skin and hair. So it's, you know, these proteins are who we are. It's what we express. It becomes us. We call this protein expression our phenotype. Okay? The genetics, the DNA that is transcribed into messenger RNA, that is our genotype. That is what you get from your mom and dad. But once that's transcribed and then translated into protein, our phenotype is what we express. And so when a cell is stressed, what it will do is it will, in a beautiful way of sharing information, it will share its stress with other cells in the same body or even outside of our body. And some of these messenger RNAs that leave the nucleus are released through a process called exocytosis, where a pinched off portion of the cell membrane with that messenger RNA is released. So we have like this protein phospholipid capsule surrounding the messenger RNA. And this is what they found around cells of sick people when they first came across the technology called an electron microscope. Because before they had electron microscopes, they didn't have their pathogen, because this was way too tiny. So tiny that it fits through the small holes of a face fiber, which make them completely useless. But I digress. So these are very tiny. And so they call these, I mean, we've known about these before, you know, these are called exosomes. Exosomes, oops, I crossed it out. Exosomes. Exosomes are products of exocytosis. It's just the sharing of information from a cell that's stressed. And you know what things stress cells? Well, obviously, electromagnetic frequencies. If you read the book called The Invisible Rainbow, he discusses some of the things that create exosome release, you know, and he discusses those in Invisible Rainbow as kind of a history of the different electromagnetic types of frequencies that our cells were exposed to through the various time periods. From radio waves to radar to all of these things, right? I mean, think about our Earth before any technology, or at least, you know, in this current expression, because I think maybe Atlantis probably had a lot of technology and then all of that was crushed. And we might be on the same railroad train as what happened to Atlantis, which, by the way, Rudolf Steiner talks about. Rudolf Steiner, he's badass, you know. I think there's some good information you can glean from listening to this guy talk. Oh, I'm not on that YouTube video anymore. But anyway, before our current Earth's cycle that we're currently living in, there was a time when man walked upon this earth and they weren't exposed to as much technology as we had today. And so with each new introduction of technology, radio waves, television waves, all of the different towers that are on the earth, and then the satellites up in space, all of the different Gs, the 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, and now the really evil 5G. All of those Gs, they influence our cells. They stress our cells. And then for the very first time, that stressed cell is going to be like, holy shit, what's going on? I need to let some people know about this. And out comes an exosome. And these little exosomes, when they were using electron microscopes, were seen just outside of diseased cells. And because Rockefeller allopathic scientists really like to pathologize things, they're like, that's our pathogen. Because they knew before the virus was before the virus was discovered, they knew bacteria were quite profitable. And I'm going to tell you right here and now, bacteria are also not to be feared. Nothing that comes from nature is to be feared. I mean, yes, certain bacteria have been known to cause issues, but really they're not there causing the problem. Our interstitial congestion is the problem. The fact that we're eating an unnatural diet and building up too much congestion in our interstitial spaces. And that serves as a food source for unnatural bacteria to show up and start to eat it away so that it doesn't cause more problems in our body. So the bacteria are there really to help us. And when we eat and live aligned with nature and in balance, the correct bacteria show up. We don't even need probiotics. You don't need anything. Don't take antibiotics because that kills the good guys and you don't want to kill the good guys. Bacteria are our friends. So anyway, Rockefeller and all of the evil people he influenced, they made a lot of money selling antibiotics. It was quite profitable. So they can find bacteria, they can create something to kill the bacteria and sell it, and everybody was happy in Big Pharma. They just loved antibiotics. But, there were some issues because we need bacteria. There is a 10-to-1 ratio of bacterial cells to human cells in every human being. They are a part of us. They live in a symbiotic relationship with us. We need things these bacteria produce, and they're there to help us. And when we kill too many of them, we become very sick. So, widespread antibiotic use became a problem. And it started causing a lot of issues. And so, those son of a bitches in Big Pharma, they're like, we need something else. We need a new pathogen. And in came the virus, which is really just an exosome, which is an excretion. It's a type of detoxification event of a stressed cell. And that's all it is. And now they find it. And you know what? They don't even have the genome, because they've not even found for the COVIDs what this exosome is. They have a computer model of what they think the messenger RNA is of this exosome that they're calling the COVIDs. But they don't know what it is. They've never isolated it. And this is the thing that they're using to create fear. This is the thing they're saying on every different news program and every school and every hospital, and everybody's got to wear a face diaper. They're creating this very large campaign to make this something that will create panic and make people do things that they normally wouldn't do if they weren't feeling so much fear. Mothers exposing their beautiful children to this evil. This is a trial. These things aren't even approved. And this whole thing, it's so insane, and I'm flabbergasted that anybody really thinks this is a threat. I'm flabbergasted why, when I attend Zoom meetings at my college, everybody has a face diaper on. It saddens me that I can't see their faces anymore. The only people I can see the faces of are the people that are attending the Zoom meeting alongside me at home. Thank God they're not they're not wearing any face diapers. But it's really getting to me. Maybe I'll use this last 15 minutes of my time to just kind of vent for a little bit, but I've been feeling it. I've been feeling really... it's hard to kind of keep my spirits up, right? It's really hard to stay positive when I'm not seeing much evidence of people waking up. Yes, there's lots of protests, and I think, it's great, but it's not enough. We're not doing enough. And, it brings me back to the teachings of Jesus, I guess. I think that's kind of where we are. What did Jesus come to this earth? What was the Christ impulse that Rudolf Steiner talks about? That middle path. What was Jesus's message? It definitely wasn't to curl up in a ball and just follow the mandates of the powers that should not be. Covering your face, injecting yourself with chemical poisons. That's not the message of Jesus. Jesus was the heart. He was love. He had a feminine quality about himself. You know, you've seen all of those pictures of Jesus Christ where he's pointing to his heart. And that kind of connects us to our earlier discussion of the heart and that powerful, energetic expression that it has. I mean, the heart has its own nervous system, its own conduction system, its own electrical force. It's a very powerful force. I've shared with you on earlier live streams my kind of, I guess it was a Kundalini experience where I felt this most amazing kind of orgasmic energy rising up to my chest and flowing throughout my heart, flowing like a geyser from my heart, this beautiful expression of love and energy. And during this experience, I saw, my power animal. I was in connection with something so beautiful, so full of love. And it was a source of feeling that I believe Jesus probably felt all of the time. That's the Christ impulse. This is our true potential and power. And it seems like everything else doesn't even matter. The bickering, the latest variant, the new injection, so much distracts us from our true power. And this is why we kind of need to come back to those esoteric teachings. This is why Mark Passio, when you begin with video number 1, and he takes you through the esoteric understanding, go to his website, What on Earth is Happening? Go to his podcast, beginning with podcast number 1. And he starts introducing to you slowly that which will unfold, these teachings. And, I need to go back and re-listen to them again from number 1. Many of his videos I've listened to multiple times, but, starting again from number 1 in order, I think would be a really good thing for me to do right now, because I need to be reminded of this. I need to be reminded that there is something greater than this indoctrination control that Ahriman and his minions have done to mankind. And is Jesus, is he forgotten? Has Jesus been forgotten? I don't want Ahriman to win. I don't want Ahriman to be I think we need that middle path again. First we had Lucifer, and we became spiritualized, but we were ungrounded. Then Christ came, and Jesus Christ showed us the power we have. And perhaps Jesus knew that Ahriman was going to be coming for us in the future. So he shares with us these messages of the gospel. And that's, another thing. I found this book. I need to read it. It's been a while. I haven't read this. Or if I did, I don't remember reading it. But I was downstairs organizing my books and bringing a few of them upstairs. And I forgot I had this. And since I've just finished reading Jesus, the Last Great Initiate, I might take a look at this and start reading it. It was either that or I was going to go back and read the gospel in the Bible. I was going to start with the Gospel of John, because I think his gospel is the most esoteric, the most spiritual, if you will. But they're all, they all touch upon the teachings of Jesus. Because we really need Jesus. We all need Jesus right now. We need to remember his message. And I'm not trying to, promote Christianity as a religion. As Mark Passio says, religion is only there to hold us back. We need these esoteric teachings Jesus was an initiate. The Kybalion was shared by the initiates, from Hermes Trismegistus, Hermes the thrice great. Hermes was a predecessor to Jesus. These are messages that humans, this is part of our lineage, this is part of us being reminded who we are. And we shouldn't just, accept these mechanistic descriptions of who we are, about who we are as a physical human body, who we are as a society. We're something much greater than we even realize. And I hope we can take that power of our greater knowing and just rise above this nonsense. And it really does. I mean, it sounds kind of cliche, but it does really begin with turning off the mainstream media narrative. Just turn off the television. Start reading books again. Start going around in nature. Walk in nature. I mean, in his book, Human Heart, Cosmic Heart, Tom Cowan talks about, when we're talking about blood flow through blood vessels, I don't know if it's in this book or not. I think it's in the his other book. He has a couple of books on water. Oh no, he has it here. It's right here. I shared this book in one of my naturopathic biology courses. But you take a tube, which are blood vessels, are tubes, and they're lined with endothelial cells, which are cells that have a phospholipid bilayer with a, protein coating on the surface. And that creates a hydrophilic surface on the interior. And that creates this EZ, exclusion zone, which is kind of a gelatinous water, which I think he refers to as structured water. And that gelatinous water is somewhat protective, but it helps to push the water in the interior forward. So you can see the flow that is created through this energized tube. Now, if you put this in, a lead container away from any energetic source, like the sun, or away from another human, that flow stops. So you do need energy in the form of the sun, which is really, the sun is our greatest source of energy. It's the source of all energy on the planet Earth. I mean, the sun shines down on the plants, the chlorophyll and the green leaves of a plant undergo photosynthesis, creating sugars, simple sugars, which animals like humans take in, and we catabolize that sugar in the presence of oxygen to create ATP, energy. And then that's the energy we use to express, to create. We as humans are powerful creators. We're here to create. We're not here to follow orders. We're not here to follow mandates. We are not here to hide our faces and look down. I think the first big step we need to take in knowing our true power is to all, in a resounding voice, all humans on this planet must rise up and say, in a powerful voice, the most powerful word in the human language. And that is no. So, for those of you that might have enjoyed this educational video, I just maybe want to share with you
who are, by virtue of their intellectual power, able to understand this spiritual scientific knowledge, this knowledge that has been sought in supersensible worlds. The rational grasp of spiritual science is vitally necessary today, for it is the means whereby the opposing cultural forces are overcome. Man's intellect today is so vast that the whole of spiritual science can be understood where there is a will. Moreover, cultivating and understanding of this nature is a matter of universal cultural interest and not an egotistical affair. For such an understanding can be striven for if those intellectual forces, which are employed today in scientific domains on all sorts of trivial projects, frittered away in modern economic life, and moreover applied in a futile and perhaps even soul-destroying technology, are to be used in a suitable way, so that people are no longer misguided from their earliest childhood onward. One would then see how easily the treasures of spiritual knowledge could indeed be channeled toward an understanding of humanity. This is the one aspect. The other golden rule is this, that something more is needed today if the gifts of the Spirit are to be made fruitful for our culture. The first is something that must be wrested from Ahriman. People today are so clever, for Ahriman sees to it that this is so. And oh, how clever people are. But they apply their cleverness only for materialistic ends. People are not merely clever, they are super clever. We shall speak of this further in the coming lectures, in order that you may see what an immense influence the Ahrimanic element has on the super cleverness of modern times. But something else is also necessary. Much still needs to be wrested from another spirit. We need not merely cleverness with which to gain a real insight into spiritual knowledge, but we need above all, and with the greatest urgency, the words are barely adequate, qualities of liveliness, enthusiasm, fire, and warmth in those human souls who are the recipients of these spiritual gifts. We need people who can demonstrate the reality of these spiritual riches with the whole of their souls. It is in the realm of the inner life that this knowledge must be wrested from the luciferic powers which are now so active in the world. There is a beautiful vista. It is the picture of someone who in calm clarity, but with an inner fire and enthusiasm, because it is for him a necessity, is able to engender an inner warmth for this spiritual knowledge. But there is another picture, that of someone who tries to lull himself to sleep by means of this spiritual knowledge, to become dreamy and imbued with warmth, to expand into the forces of the universe and unite his soul with the divine all. These are contrasts that can easily be observed at the present time, contrasts which it is necessary to observe. For it will not be easy to incorporate what we receive from the Spirit into human culture. And yet this must be done. Human culture needs it. People will not only have to learn to think very differently, they will also have to feel and experience things in a different way. Well, I could say a lot more about what I have just said, but I would prefer to stop now, so that you have the opportunity to think about it.
And we will stop here, since my time on this live stream is coming to a close. But I do like this man's voice as he reads from the works of Rudolf Steiner. Hopefully that gave you a little glimpse of Rudolf Steiner's description of Ahriman, and he even mentioned a little bit of the Luciferic kind of expression as well. But we need that balance, and that's what the Christ impulse is. But I was going to share with you all my website where I offer my courses. My course on the blood and heart is ending on Sunday, and I probably will be working on new classes beginning in January. I do need to take some time off. It's been quite stressful lately, and I will be working with Dr. Morris maybe to offer more affordable classes, maybe even some free classes to get more people to join, because I do want to share this knowledge with as many people as possible, so we can create a new powerful knowing to transcend the Ahrimanic confluence, so we can realize just how powerful we are and amazing. So thank you all, and we will end it here.